should be defined, and it should be specific, and you cannot have too broad hypothesis, because you have to make it sure that whether you have a hypothesis in a directional way or non-directional way. You specify the direction of the relationship between independent variables and dependent variables. So remember that clear, specific, and testable. You see, testable with available methods. What could it be if you have a very clear and specific hypothesis, but there are no research methods to test them? You want to test the length, you don't have any measuring tape or anything to measure. It's no use to have such a hypothesis. Hypothesis should be value free. This is interesting. In principle, yes, there should not be any biases from the researcher's point of view. But in real life, sometimes, value free is too ideal to achieve. At least you have some of your values in that study already. So it's not a neutral or value free statement. But anyway, we should try in every possible way to avoid to put our own value into the hypothesis. Otherwise, you will test your own values, and you have a lot of bias, and then you come up with the answer that you would tend to accept or approve your hypothesis. Okay. Now, there are two types of hypothesis in research. Okay. One is called research hypothesis. Sometimes they call it alternative hypothesis. They use the symbol H1. The research hypothesis is the one that the researcher wants to find out if his data will support it or not. It usually states in terms of difference, not equal to, greater than, and less than, or in what way independent variables affect the dependent variables. Okay. Another one is called statistical hypothesis. Sometimes we call it null hypothesis. Have you heard of this word before? You see, and use the symbol HO. In this null hypothesis, the researcher is testing against his data. They don't test research hypothesis. They test the null hypothesis. It is therefore stating in terms of no difference, equal to, which means the independent variables have no effect on dependent variables. That's why we call it null hypothesis. This key. Since the null hypothesis, there is no relationship between independent and dependent variables, or independent variable has no effects on dependent variables. So by rejecting the null hypothesis would result in accepting the research hypothesis, and failing to reject null hypothesis would result in denying the research hypothesis. Just remember these two words: research hypothesis, statistical or null hypothesis. It is the null hypothesis that we are testing against it with our data. Okay, I give you an example of the research hypothesis and the null hypothesis. Okay. If you want to study the health of the babies in the urban and rural area, in Singapore there is no rural area. Maybe it's very difficult to understand, but for those who are from other countries, you know the urban area is different from the rural area. And your hypothesis would use the firstborn babies, the weight of the firstborn baby, as an indicator for health. So you put a hypothesis like this: the average weight of the firstborn babies in urban and rural areas are different. They are not the same. This is called non-directional. We don't know which one is greater, which one is less, but it's different. Or you can put it, the average weight of firstborn babies in urban area is greater than the firstborn babies in rural area. This is directional, greater. And then you collect the data, go to the hospital and get the firstborn baby weights in the rural area and the urban area and compare the means of the weight of those two groups, whether they are different, whether they are greater than the other group as we suspected or we speculated in our hypothesis. Okay. You can put a research hypothesis like this. There is a strong correlation between cigarette smoking and lung cancer. This is the research hypothesis. In null hypothesis term, you would say there is no correlation between cigarette smoking and lung cancer. You see, in terms of the average weight of the firstborn, the null hypothesis would be there is no difference between average weight of the firstborn babies in urban and rural areas. There is no relation between cigarette smoking and lung cancer. It is this null hypothesis that we use statistics to test it. Okay, and we hope to reject the null hypothesis. That's why we can accept our research hypothesis. You see, okay. Hypothesis testing will be taught in the statistics class in your next trip to Chiang Mai. Okay. Now, talk about another concept, variables. Can you give a definition of variables? We use a lot of this word in a lot of places. Variables. What is a variable?
Things that could go wrong.
Okay. Anything could go wrong according to the Murphy's law.
Murphy's law. An assumption?
A variable it can be the thing that you want to study. Simply put it this way: you study the variable when you do research. You study the variable. You study the relationship between variables, how they affect one another. So it could be a person, a place, a thing, a phenomenon, whatever you want to try to measure. A variable varies. Anything that doesn't vary cannot be classified as variable. It is a constant. It's not a variable. You see. It means that they must have more than one values. They must have different values. If you want to study something among the Catholic nuns, gender is not a variable because they're all female. Unless you have male nun, then gender could play as the variable. Okay, types of variable. In research, we have independent variables. This variable stands alone. It's not affected by other variables. That's why we call it independent. For example, age of a person seems to be independent, and other factors such as what they eat, how much they eat, how much they go to school, how much they watch television, are not going to change the person's age, but age would play a role in those activities of a person. Okay, independent. Dependent, as the name suggests, is the variable that its value depends on the change of other variables. It is these dependent variables that researchers want to understand. In summary, an independent variable can be described as the cause, and dependent variable can be described as the effect. Cause and effect relationship. Hypothesis is simply a conjecture of a researcher on the relationship between independent and dependent variables. There are probably three kinds of relationships that could take place. One is called asymmetrical, A-S-Y-M, asymmetrical, not symmetrical. Means that independent variable cause some change in the dependent variables. Anything. But another kind of relationship could be symmetrical, which means equal. Two things happen at the same time, but there is no causal relationship between the two. For example, every time the longan trees yield the fruits in Chiang Mai, there is political troubles in Bangkok every year. This is extreme example, but you have to be careful. Sometimes two things just happen, and they are not correlated at all. They are not correlated at all. Longan politics, yes. You remember this symmetrical relationship. And also another type of relationship can be called reciprocal relationship. Both can be causes and both can be effects. If it is going on for a while, you don't know which one is cause, you don't know which one is effect. For example, profit and investment. When the profit changes, you have more profit, you tend to invest more. And when you invest more, you earn more profit. And when you earn more profit, you invest even more. This is reciprocal. We don't know which one is the cause, which one is the effect. It is the first type of relationship that researcher is interested on. We are not interested in the symmetrical or reciprocal relationships of the variable. We want to know what is the cause and what is the effect. So when you test the hypothesis, you have to bear in mind that perhaps what you are testing is just symmetrical or just reciprocal, you see. Now, third kind is the intervening variable. Intervening, as the name suggests, something that intervenes, something that impacts the relationship between independent and dependent variable. Usually, the intervening variables is caused by independent variable and is itself a cause for the change in dependent variable. I would give you an example like this. You have noticed that highly educated people tend to spend more money than the people with low level of education. So you have two variables, level of education and money spending. You think that as the education arises or going higher, people tend to spend more money. You see that we spend a lot of money. We are highly educated people. You don't get the construction worker from Singapore to come to Chiang Mai and spend the money that we spend. Maybe there is a relationship between education and money spending, but it could be intervened by some other variable. If we take away that other variable, the relationship between independent and dependent, between the level of education and the level of money spending is gone. In other words, it is the level of education that could perhaps income. It is the high level of education that causes the income of a person to rise, and then they have enough money or more money to spend. That's why the higher spending, higher education, higher spending. What if the higher education doesn't yield any higher income, and then you will see that level of money spending would probably be the same. It is not affected by the education level at all. In Thailand, it's very, very strange. You see, if you work with the government, I spent 9.5 years outside Thailand pursuing higher education. All of those years were not counted for my salary increase in Thailand. So my salary stayed the same as 9 years ago. And when I come back, I found myself so low comparing to the other people. You see, so education doesn't increase my income, and then my spending would probably be the same as 9 years ago. That's it. You'd find it strange strategy of a human development process in the country. Okay. Failure to take intervening variables into account can cause the wrong, estimate relationship between independent and dependent variables. So just bear in mind. Okay. How do we measure variables? Take for example, if you want to compare the cars, see, I don't know how many cars you have in your country, but if you want to go and buy a new car, there is Honda, Toyota, Nissan, and Mitsubishi. How do you compare them? Which one is better? You have to develop some criteria to use as an indicator to measure those four different brands of the cars, right? Factors like style, after-sales service, economy, efficiencies of the engine, things like that. And then you assign numerical values in terms of scale. Have you heard of Likert scale? You have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you just assign the values to those variables, and then you combine and get the average, and then you know that which one is better than the other one. But anyway, the way we measure variables in research, there are levels of measurement. We call that scale. The nominal level of measurement or nominal scale is what? It's a variable that you can only categorize by labeling them in a mutually exclusive way. You don't know which one is higher, which one is lower. There is no ranking order between categories. So, like a city of birth, gender, car brands, marital status, any numerical values you assign to this wouldn't make any sense in terms of mathematics. Like you might come across in a questionnaire, they put 1 for male, 2 for female. 1 and 2 is different only. You cannot say that 2 is greater than 1. Okay, now we can go faster this way. Ordinal level of measurement or ordinal scale. At this level, you can categorize, and also you can put it in order. You know which one is higher, which one is lower, but you don't know how much higher or how much lower. You don't know the intervals between the ranking of the variable. Let's say language ability. You have beginner, intermediate, and advanced. You know that intermediate is higher than beginner, but you don't know how much higher. And you know that advanced level is higher than intermediate, but you don't know how much higher. So a Likert scale type of questions like strongly disagree to strongly agree is also ordinal scale, ordinal level of measurement. You know which one is higher, which one is lower. That's all you know. Okay. Interval scale, interval level of measurement. At this level, you can categorize, you can rank, and then you can measure the interval between the neighboring variables, which means you know which one is higher, which one is lower, and you know how much higher and how much lower between the two variables. Say the temperature. Temperature the first day that we had is probably 15. Temperature now is probably 25. There is 10 degree difference between the first day temperature and today temperature. And every 10 degree, you know that which one is colder, right? Which one is warmer. But you see, temperature has no true 0 point. So you can make a ratio. You cannot compare them in terms of ratio. You cannot say that this one is twice as cold as that one. You know, if you have like a 10 degree and 20 degree, you can say it's 10 degree difference, but you cannot say that 10 degree is twice as cold or twice colder than a 20 degree. And between 20 and 30, you have 10 degree difference, but you cannot compare them in terms of ratio. Normally we feel we are cold or hot by comparing to what? When you feel cold and hot, you're comparing that to what?
Body temperature.
You compare to body temperature. What is your normal body temperature?
36.7.
36.7. In Thailand we say 37. So we don't want the decimal point. But anyway, anything higher than 37, you feel warm. Anything lower than that, you feel cold. The closer to the 0 Celsius, the much colder in every degree of Celsius drop. You know, if it drops from 37 to 36, 35, 34, you don't feel much different. But if it drops from say 15 to 14 to 13, you feel shivering already. So that is called interval level of measurement or interval scale. The last scale is what we call, say IQ is also. You cannot say that a man who has 140 IQ is twice smarter than a man with 70 IQ. There is no 0 IQ for a man. There is no true 0 point. Okay. Last one, ratio scale. Ratio level of measurement. At this level, you can categorize, you can rank order them, you can infer equal intervals, and then also you can compare them in terms of ratio, because there is a true 0 point. Things like height. If you are 180 and the other person is 90, you can say that the first person is twice taller than the second person. Age, weight, income. Okay. If you have $50,000, I have 25, and then you have twice more, 2 times income than my income. Why do we have to know about the scale of the variables? What good will it do? Why is it necessary?
When you have frog porridge, to kill the frog, you put it in cold water and you heat it up slowly. Then the interval of the temperature rises gradually.
Gradually, yes.
And then the frog is ready to be eaten. He will not jump out from the pot.
Well, that's an interesting answer, but I don't think it would be.
Because he used to eat.
Yeah, you can adjust. You can adjust to it. Yeah, you can adjust to it. Okay.
Killing yourself.
But anyway.
like the Baguio, the dog. They hit the dog until he died. The chicken until he bleed to death.
No. The scales that we learned from nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio is going from lowest to highest. And they are cumulative in nature, which means the ratio scale would have all the properties of the lower scale. The interval scale would have all the property of the lower scale. And the ordinal scale would have ordinal and also nominal scale, characteristic, but not the other way around. Not the other way around. We have to learn these scales because there are certain restrictions in statistics that you can use. You cannot calculate the average or the means of the nominal scale. It's not possible. They just separate them one from another. Now, we have about 30 minutes. Let's say research design. Research design is just a roadmap of doing research. You see, if you have a good research design, you have a good chance to succeed in finishing your research work. Okay. A good research design would help the researcher to progress smoothly and rapidly in his work. It also enhances the internal and external validity of the research. We talk about that later. Example. Okay. Now, I would like to show you an example of the research design called experimental research. Have you ever heard of the concept Pygmalion Effect? Pygmalion, Pygmalion Effect. What is it? Pygmalion Effect is something like this. If other people would think about you in certain way, you would tend to be that type of the person that other people think. If the teacher say that all students are stupid, students tend to be stupid. It is like a self-fulfilling prophecy that you received. Have you watched the movie called My Fair Lady?
Yes.
That's the idea from the George Bernard Shaw about the Pygmalion Effect on the flower girl. I watched it when I was in high school, probably long time ago, still black and white at that time. But I still remember the last word that in the movie. If you don't remember the story, I can tell it a little. See, there is a flower girl, low class, low manner, low everything. You see, that's flower girl in certain part of England. And the professor kind of gamble among, and I don't remember the exact, but the hypothesis is that I can change this girl to be a high class lady. And they train her. They correct her pronunciation, everything, the way she eats and manners, everything, dress. And finally the test comes. They would take her to a very beautiful banquet, in a, beautiful house. I don't remember the setting, but at that time, if they found out that you are not from a high class people, high echelon of the society, and then there would be a criminal punishment for you. And then the exciting part is that when they introduce this girl and sitting at a table like this, and there is one person talk to another, talk to, and we were so, I think she must get caught until come to the last person and hear what they're talking about. They were guessing that this girl are from a princess of this country in Europe or in that country. The word that the flower lady said is that Professor Higgins, I probably don't know Higgins, Professor Higgins, I can be the flower girl or a high class lady, depends on what other people think of me and treat me. If you treat a person like a flower girl, she would always remain to be flower girl.
Yes, true.
This is called Pygmalion Effect. Now, there is two scholars, Robert Rosenthal and Leonard Jacobson. They want to find out if this is true in a classroom setting. This Pygmalion Effect is true in a classroom setting. So they decided to do a research called Pygmalion in the classroom. Okay. Now the title of the research, Pygmalion in the classroom. The concept used in this research, or the theory behind this research, is Pygmalion Effect. The hypothesis is that teachers' expectations on the performance of the students have the effect on the academic performance of the students. So this is going to be experimental research. They want to find out. And they pick one school in a low-income community to be a place of study. Now, this is the design. Okay. You see this diagram, the table? Let me explain. EG means experimental group. The group that you put any treatment in it to see the effect that it would change something. CG is the control group that you put nothing. There's no treatment. Treatment in this case is like an independent variable in the hypothesis. Okay. Now they divide people into two groups. I try to think about what they do. Okay. In the stage, in the beginning of the school year, they would have a pre-test for the students. The one who is clever, who is gifted and talented, would be put into one class. And the other one would be a little bit slow learner, would be put into another class. So you have two groups of students, bright and not so bright, okay? Dull students. And then they made an announcement, every teacher in the school knows the name of the student in the, call it A group, see, excellent group. And then C or D group, not so good group. Okay. Now, but the way they do the research is interesting. They mix the student. They randomize them. They random selection them. But they don't tell the teacher. Only the researcher knows. The two groups are now mixed. Not one group better than the other group. But the teachers of the whole school don't know this. And then they want to test. So they all test the students. Of course, the pre-test is almost the same because we mixed the student already. After the year passed, they do the test again. We call it post-test. The experimental group, the group that the teachers in the school believe that they are good, tend to be a high performance student. The other group is very, very low. You follow me? Okay. Why? Why is that the case? because the teachers have something in mind that this group are clever, this group are not clever. And maybe throughout the years, through his word of encouragement or whatever, I don't know whatever happened, but it affects the performance of the student. So if you follow this diagram, the pre-test, the pre-test, we did the test for the experimental group, we call it O1, observation 1, and we did the test for the control group, we call it observation 3. Now for the first group, we put treatment. Treatment is the knowledge of the teachers about the performance of the student. And then the post-test is O2. So difference in O2 and O1, the score in post-test and pre-test, we call it difference in experimental group, DE. Okay? And same with the control group that we don't put any treatment. The difference between pre-test and post-test would be called DC. Now, this is just the explanation of the diagram. To confirm that any changes in academic performance is the result of the treatment or independent variable X, the result that we receive from the experiment should be as follows. O2 should be greater than O1 because of the treatment X, and O2 should be greater than O4, and DE should be greater than DC. See, O2 greater than O1 because of the treatment. You can do with this with all kinds of things. Like Pastor Gerard said that the effect of putting priest collar on the priest would affect the behavior or not. You have to random selection the minister of God into two groups. One is the experimental group, the other one is the control group. You see, you random select them, and then you do the attitude measurement with or without priest collar. The first group, you ask them to put priest collar. They go out into the market, they be well behaved, and they're more self-control and things like that. And then you can just accept your hypothesis. But if there is no difference in behavior, you can conclude that the priest collar doesn't have any effect on the behavior of the ministers.
It has the effects of the audience, because when you go on the quality test in the Arab Street area, the tourist bus from Korea comes down, they all greet you.
Yes.
And they ask for prayer.
Yes.
Father, can you pray for me?
Yes. You see.
Then it heals.
All right. So
in the nursing home, the nuns, they make sure they take off. Because if they are walking through the ward, everybody wants
to pray.
Attention. So she cannot do her work.
Wow.
So sometimes the color opens doors. Sometimes the color creates aggressive behavior. Like in Jerusalem, you have to take off the color.
Why?
When there is Holocaust survivors in your midst who remember the trauma of Catholic priests keeping silent during the time of the Nazi.
Wow, you didn't stand up for me, huh?
Yes, so they have this trauma. So if it causes pain to someone, then don't use it. But if it opens the door, like in Geylang, it opened the door to the brothel community, use it by all means.
Okay. Now, let me conclude with this example. Are you on the same page with me? Just get back to the table. Okay. So you get the pre-test, post-test. This one, you get it. Okay. Now, you see, I had the privilege to stay at headquarters of King's College one time in Geylang Street. Pastor Gerard gave me a lot of books to read because that's the way to kill time, and he didn't have to pay much attention to me, so I read a lot of books. But one book is very, very interesting. Harvard University, Harvard Medical School, they did an experiment. They want to know the effect of prayer over patients. So they divide the patients into two groups, randomly selected. One group called experimental group, they have someone to pray for, earnestly pray for. The other group receive regular treatment without being prayed for. They want to find out that the chance of survival of those patients would be significantly different or not. Can you guess the result?
I guess those who are prayed for will feel better.
Yeah.
That's the hypothesis. That's the research hypothesis. But the null hypothesis, they put it, there's no difference. You see. So they measure, and then they fail to reject the null hypothesis, which means that there is no difference between the two groups. But when I read that research, I have many things in my mind. You see, there are so many variables that are not controlled. Perhaps the faith of the patients play a significant role also, right? Yeah. And these things is the sovereignty of God. Cannot force God to heal this person and not heal this person. But that is the ideas of experimental research. Not very far from Chiang Mai city, perhaps 10-15 kilometers, there are two villages. These two villages are poor. People have malnutrition starting from the head of the village to almost everyone. And then the team from the university went there and observed how and what the people eat, and they are so ignorant about nutrition science. They don't know which one is good for what. They eat whatever they have been eaten, from the ancestor up to now. They have beans, they have a lot of beans. They have eggs, they sell those beans and eggs. And then they buy, some salted seafood and some MSG and some chilies and those type of things. So they decided to do the experiment. So they did pre-test. They measure with health indicators of these two villages. Okay, they are all the same. One village, they send a team to teach the people how to eat. If you want to eat som tam, instead of put MSG, you put a lot of beans, peanuts and everything. They don't change their diet, but educate them how to eat more protein and things like that. And the other one, with no training, no supervising, just let them eat. By the end of the year, of course, the health score of the first group, O2 is better than, post-test is better than the pre-test. The second group, the control group, remain unchanged, remain the same. You see, it is the ignorance that causes malnutrition, not the poverty. That's as simple as that. The experimental. You divide your study group into two groups. Divide them in such a way that there is no bias. You random select the people into the group. If you want to teach English, a new style of teaching English, You want to test if it is more effective or not. You can do this kind of research. Like at one time, there's a man in Bangkok. He suspected that the reason that the school children in countryside cannot speak English because of the teacher doesn't have a proper teaching method. The teacher themselves cannot speak English. How can you teach students to be able to speak English that way? So they decided to do experiment. They asked the teachers not to teach any English for 1 year, but using the video. At that time we still use the videotape teaching. Of course they give training to the teachers to help, but no more teaching one school year. Can you imagine that children in the mountain can speak English exactly the same as the children in the top school in Bangkok? So this is experimental research. Just you can apply it to your line of work or your thesis or whatever. See, and when the missionary set foot in very remote area of Chiang Mai, before there was a lot of problems, the alcoholics, gamblings, and and stealing, burglary, and then once people came to Christ, and the crime rate of the city, of the village, decreases significantly. So you can apply this research methodology into your work the way you feel like, provided that you understand the design, experimental design. Have any more questions to ask? I would stop here. Just wait, open for the question Q&A time.
And you can speak into the mic if anybody has any thoughts further.
I have a question regarding the school's experimental research on the Pygmalion Effect. Okay, so I just need to clarify from this example, if there's treatment on the experimental group, which means the students were mixed up, but they were treated better, or they have been given more expectation to perform, and then the control group will be teachers who do not expect the children to perform.
Yes. What's the question?
What is the control group?
Oh, what is the treatment?
Yeah. What do you do with the control group? You don't.
Well, they don't do anything, but unconsciously the teachers, knows that this group is better than the other one. So they kind of sometimes expect, sometimes could be shoulder tapping and think, oh, you did a very good job and things like that. We never know. But it's the attitude of the...
Okay, so in the experimental group, they mix up the students, and in the control group, they left them in their A, B, C, D classes.
No, they're both the same. Control group and experiment group, they are the same.
All mixed up.
They're all mixed up. Yeah.
And so what's the control? Not.
That the interesting about this experiment is that even the teachers don't know. They totally believe that this room is the bright student. This room is not bright student.
So all
the teachers in the school believe that way.
So the difference would be the better treatment and better treatment for the A and B group, and then not so high expectations on the C and D group. As a result, there's a difference in their performance.
Could be, yes.
Okay.
Yes. Let's put it this way. You see how much effect the verbal of parents on the children. You go to the prison, everyone you ask, you say that, one time my parents said that I would amount to nothing, I would end up in jail, and they actually end up in jail. It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy, because the parent believes that way. It has a Pygmalion effect on the children. And they go to school. The teacher said the same thing. Oh, you're so stupid that you won't amount to anything in life. You never study, things like that. And then that kind of affect the students unconsciously, probably. This is called Pygmalion. You can be a high-class, high echelon lady, or the flower girl, depends on people treat you like that. If the teacher treat you as a bright student, you tend to be bright. If the teacher treat you as a stupid and not so bright student, you tend to be according to the treatment of the teacher. I think the important thing is to just remember the design, and then you can apply it. The treatment can be anything that you want to find out. What effect the treatment will be on the dependent variable.
Thank you.
You understand?
Yes.
Okay.
So the intervening factor would be the treatment. Would be the teacher actually, because in my previous experience, we actually have this thing about good students and bad students.
Yes.
Oh, so sorry, not bad.
Yes.
Weak students.
Okay.
In fact, they are literally divided into different sects. But there were points in time where we deliberately mixed them up, and then the teachers have to cater to all the needs of the different students. We could actually identify that they were weak or not so weak, even if they were mixed up. So it's up to the teacher, how the teacher treats the whole
Yes,
class.
sometimes it can work the opposite way. Teachers could be so
can discern.
They try to help in Thailand. They try to help the not so smart student more than the already smart one. That could affect the experiment, you see. Yes.
I remember when I was about 18, I taught a relief class of very bad students. A class that the whole school condemned because they're overage. They're like 3-4 years over age, and they're very tall, they're gangster-like. And they throw me into this class because I'm a relief teacher. And I was supposed to teach them math. And so I told them, I'm going to train them by taking the top school, really the top 3 school, all their exam questions. And then I'm going to train them, and then they want to beat the top school. So they work really hard.
Yes.
And so in the whole semester, they did so well that at the end, this class has the highest score in the whole school.
Yes.
And for that standard.
Yes, because you believe in them.
Because I put a competition.
You make competition.
And then you can do it, you can beat it. I'm going to train you. If you subject yourself to this training, what do you call that? Tough training. It's just like practice and practice and practice. And they did it.
Yeah.
And they were so happy, and the principal was so happy. But
that happens in the school setting. You have sometimes the teachers have more compassion on the lesser group. That helps them.
In the army, there's a saying: there are no bad soldiers, only bad officers.
Okay. Yeah.
I want us to think carefully about that statement, because the story was told of General MacArthur when he found some soldiers drunk, expecting when it was a young officer, expecting to be to reprimand the soldier. His commanding officer reprimanded him. he was responsible for the behavior of his subordinates. There are no bad soldiers, only bad officers. So I wonder if we were to change the pay structure for teachers,
could be
that if we have failing students, that the teacher would be penalized. And suddenly the teachers would wake up, and the professors as well. But
students can also sabotage it.
yeah. Now the principle of Pygmalion also, I believe, affects in marriages. Actually, there's no bad spouse. There's no bad husband or bad wife. If you hear of someone complaining of the spouse, then it's that person's fault, because you have the Pygmalion. You have the power of the tongue.
Yeah.
The power of the tongue. The Bible talks about the power of the tongue to create reality over the child. And that's why, but of course not to the point where the parent is deceived of the child, or there are cases where there are delinquent spouses and delinquent children, and delinquent soldiers and delinquent students. But the idea of the Pygmalion effect, why it's so appealing to us, is because it is a phenomena that we observe and was made into a movie, My Fair Lady, and so played so beautifully with that final line that you mentioned. If you treated me like a lady, I would be a lady. If you treat me like a gutter person, I would be a gutter person. That's an external phenomena that we observe in the power of the treatment of the tongue, in either blessing or curse. I think the breakthrough that we have had in this seminar on advanced graduate research is going beyond just phenomena and effect. It's going to the very root of education. That could we have the major premise or hypothesis that every soul is ordained for greatness?
Except, you have to put, except being treated unfairly or badly.
Except being treated fairly. But the premise is still there. That there is no stupid question. Neither is there a ignorant person. If only they had not been deceived. And so the idea being that if it is true that, well, let's put it this way, we would have to prove that it is true, that the purpose of this college or university is to prove the premise, the major premise, or hypothesize this, that every soul is ordained for greatness. Can we find the genius within our students, within the student body? Can we help that student to identify the greatness that he or she is oblivious to? Most children, even some adults, many adults, go through life without seeing their own worth, and as a result spiral down into all sorts of social evils and ills, unconsciously or subconsciously. Instead of that ascent of man, it becomes a descent into animal life. So
I think the esteem, the self-esteem of a person is affected very much by this Pygmalion effect around him or her. See? But it's a very good discussion. I have to take off, and then I have to go to another meeting, and then I would be in contact with you somehow this afternoon or whatever, you can contact Pastor Gerard and then he can call me.